8,
You're watching The
7,
Experience, Comic Culture,
6,
and Sales.
5,
Streaming live daily to
4,
Facebook, YouTube,
3,
Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
Welcome, everybody. This is my first time, actually second time hosting Talkin Shop, but I am now going to be a regular intermediary host on Talkin Shop. And we have an incredible guest for you guys today. This guy is absolutely fascinating, and I'm looking forward to you guys meeting him. So stick around. You're watching Talkin Shop. So one of the things that I love about Talkin Shop is the premise of it. It kind of goes back to what I started doing when COVID hit and conventions were down. I started interviewing a lot of creators, but Miss Jen took this concept to a greater level. Imagine you're at a comic convention, and there's long lines getting from one place to another. There's crowds of people, and you want to go and you want to hang out and you want to listen to what other creators have to say about the business. Well, you get to do this from the palm of your hands or in front of your computer screen, wherever you are right now. And today we have a really wonderful guest who's going to talk to us about a Kickstarter that he has going live very soon. And it's based on a webtoon series that he's been putting out for a while now. And it is my humble pleasure to welcome Brian Rodman to Talkin Shop. Brian, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. How are you?
Fantastic, sir.
Yeah,
why don't you take it away? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us first of all, how are you doing today? How's everything going?
Yeah. So I'm Brian Rodman. I have been creating comic books since 2015 with my wife and business partner Robin. Yeah, man. Over the years, we really started the business with Memoirs of an Angel. Which was our main comic book series. We had a brief stint on Webtoon. Most of our showcase has been on Kickstarter. And we've been doing that live on Kickstarter, launching pretty consistently ever since 2018. Sorry. Yeah, man, it's been a whirlwind. The comic book series is all about angels and demons, and it's kind of like an amalgamation of how I process my faith and how I have a lot of doubts, a lot of questions that I've had on that journey, and then just loving monsters, really. A lot of, I hate like when people portray angels as like the shiny people with wings. So I turn my angels into just basically monsters from monster movies. That seems to be the most consistent. When you see angels pop up in ancient literature, people are scared to death. so Fabio really didn't seem to do that for me. But yeah, man, we've been doing this for quite a while. This upcoming Kickstarter is actually we're pivoting away from comic books. It's Memoirs of an Angel, but it is an adaptation into prose, which it's kind of a hybrid between prose and comic books, and we could get into a little bit more into that here in a little bit as to what that looks like. But it's been honestly, it's been a wild ride just making that transition due to my health kind of tanking a couple years ago. So I couldn't really make comic books consistently anymore. So this freed me up to still be able to tell my stories the way that I wanted. And I actually figured out while writing this that this is the right medium for this story, which is really exciting to just kind of discover that as you're making this huge pivot.
I agree. Brian, I spent some time getting acquainted with your work this morning, and there's some very strong imagery. And particularly if you guys have a chance to go on online and check out the webtoon for Memoirs of an Angel, there's this one panel where there's two hands are shaking. And one of them has fire and the other one has money in it. and it's just such a strong piece of art. It's like, there's the symbology there is so strong.
Mm.
And a lot of the things that you talk about, like, there's a lot of mention of how, Hitler was sort of a representation of, like, of hell trying to take over. And the fact that he lost was a symbol of our triumph. And, I've been thinking a lot about morality lately, especially about being human and everything, because, it's something I think that I think we all think about a lot. Even with heroes, it's like, what makes a hero and what makes a villain, and why do we get to decide that, and why do they get to decide that, they're the heroes or the villains? So what made you, comics is a very kind of, I want to say mainstream, or not mainstream, I want to say American comics has always had this very black and white idea of, here's the supervillain, here's the superhero.
Yeah.
Your story seems to, venture outside of that. So why comics? And initially, what initially brought you into wanting to do this as a comic?
Yeah, man. That's a great question. Initially, I mean, I love comic books. Honestly, that's my preferred medium of just engaging with stories in general. I think for me, I don't remember who said this. It might have been Frank Miller. I know a ton of people have, though, is essentially when you're dealing with comic books, whether or not you're writing or you're creating a comic or you're reading a comic books have the ability to control time in a sense, in a visual medium, in a sense that nothing else really does. So with movies, I mean, yeah, you can pause it and kind of, but it's in motion. That's what movies are. That's what film is, television. And with prose, it's not a visual medium. So you're working with your imagination with words. With comic books, you're not only just reading and ingesting the dialogue, the narration, the interior monologues, but you're dealing with, more than half of the storytelling happening is the art. And so it's a side by side gig where you're studying the art, and while you're reading the dialogue. And a lot of people, I get upset. My wife, who's not a comic book person, ironically, even though she's been helping me make comics for years now. But I'll hand her a comic and like, look, this is really good. You should read this. This won awards. It's amazing. And she'll like breeze through it in 30 minutes, and it's like this 200-page graphic novel, and I get my panties in a twist, and I'm just like, man, stop it, take your time, because to me that's what makes comic books so special. Is it gives you the ability to not only read dialogue and narration and ingest words, but also to marry that with art in a way that really no other medium can. And you can really like just take your time, as much time as you want. You can just stare at a page like you could stare at a panel, like you would stare at a piece of art in a museum, and really let the art speak to you as the words are also speaking to you. And for me, that's why I love comic books. That's the draw. And so for me, especially, I mean, originally Memoirs was supposed to be a comic book through the very end. And I had flirted with maybe, doing a novel one day, but it was all about just celebrating the medium with this story that meant so much to me.
That's interesting. I started out by reading the PDF first, and then I went back and I read the prologue, which is essentially the adapted version. And like you said, the novelization, the prose version, is really kind of a hybrid, because there's still images from the actual comic that appear there. So let's go into this, because you're getting into you're about to launch your Kickstarter. When's it go live?
It goes live in 8 days, next Tuesday. Wow. Yep, on the 25th at noon Eastern Standard Time.
Excellent. Well, guys, this is a call to action right now. Jay, if you could do us a favor and drop the link for the Kickstarter pre-launch page for Brian. And folks, if you're watching this right now, please, 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 this is so important for every single creator. Before we go live, we want to get as many people on that pre-launch page as possible, so that when we do go live, everyone who is interested will be notified that they can now back this campaign. But let's go back to this campaign for a second. It sounds to me like, based on what you told me, your wife isn't really into comics as much, but you are. So it seems like this novelization is like a happy marriage between the two. So tell us a little bit about what brought about this and why now and all that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, honestly, the biggest reason why I pivoted to prose is because in making the comic books, I did everything. I did the drawing, the colors, inking, um, lettering, all of it, and I loved it. And mostly, I did it first. I started doing it because I just couldn't afford to really pay anybody else to do the work with me. Pay them what they're worth, and so I just kind of learned how to do it myself. And I found that I enjoyed every aspect of the comic book making. However, that is a daunting task to do everything yourself, to create everything from start to finish. And I have struggled with severe asthma my whole life. But when I was 30, everything kind of just started getting a lot worse. And then 2022, over the course of a summer, I went from working essentially two full-time jobs, working my day job, 40 hours in a tech shop, and then coming home and doing comic books. I went from that to being on full-time disability, barely being able to walk to my living room some days. So, and we've changed up my medicine. We're trying some new things. I'm still not really much better. And so I was actually in the middle of making a comic book for another series that I do. Um, and we had just successfully launched, and we were finished with that Kickstarter, and I was in the middle of creating that comic book when my health tanked. And what the work that would have normally taken me maybe a month or two to do, it took me 8 months to finish. And so with my health the way that it had become. So I had a decision. I was like, well, I know the extensive nature of the story of Memoirs of an Angel specifically. It's not just a few issues and then we're done. It had already evolved into this multiple spin-off universe called the Cosmic Wheel. I had already made that decision, already set that up, already announced those things, and my health tanked. So I was like, well, crap. How can I still tell this story and actually get it out in a proper amount of time? Because with the comic book, I knew if I continued telling memoirs and its spin-offs as a comic book the way I originally intended, it would I wouldn't be able to finish it before I died. Essentially, it would take way too long. People would be waiting years for a floppy individual issue. And I didn't want to do that as a creator, and I didn't want to do that to my readers. Because as a reader, I don't, like if you have, 10 years every trade paperback, that's only 4 to 6 issues. I mean, that's a lot. That's a long time to wait. And I didn't want to do that. So I just kind of tried writing prose, and it takes a lot less energy for me to lay in my bed or recline back in my chair and type than it does to the grueling work of doing a comic book from start to finish. And the great part is I'm still able to draw. I'm still able to throw in some illustrations there. And there's actually quite a bit of illustrations in the book, which is why I say it's a bit of a hybrid, because it's comic style art that's interwoven with the prose work. And the great part of creation wise is it doesn't take a whole lot of energy for me to sit and write. Um, and it takes a lot more energy to draw. But on those days, when I don't have enough energy to draw, I can just write, and that's the majority of the story. Whereas a comic book, the majority of the story is actually the art. So it changed up the pace, and it allowed me to get more story out quicker. Because I love this story. I love the direction that we're headed, and I didn't want my readers to have to wait years in between 30 pages of comic book.
You're a much better man than I am. I've my signature series, Yushin Shin, I've been working on this book now for since I released the first issue in 2009. It's a 12-issue series, and I still have 2 issues to go.
Well,
So
hey man, look,
a very long time.
I mean, props to you, because honestly, it took me. I went through an emotional turmoil a bit making this change up. So yeah,
I honestly, to your point, I say this because I empathize with you in the sense that what it sounds like you're describing is something that a lot of creators go through, especially in the sense that this isn't the same thing as releasing a Marvel or DC book where it's like, hey, get this done or you're not getting paid. It's like we got a deadline and you had to work really hard just to get this job. Don't screw it up. Yeah. This is different. This is, hey, you're putting all your time and resources into a story that matters to you. Mm-hmm. And it is like trudging through mud, like and quicksand, or like mud that's like sucking you in. And then you got to deal with all the emotional things that come with it and still find the strength to persevere. And that's the thing that I think is really difficult. I was talking with another creator today about this, and he was saying like comics is the one medium where we never give ourselves credit for the work that we've done. Like we don't ever revel in the things that we do, and I think there's a reason to that. It's because we're putting ourselves out there. It's a lot different like when you are going to work every day and answering to someone else. You don't have to, it's not about you. When you put yourself out there, like you do in comics or books or, in prose or whatever, you were putting 100% of yourself out there. And one thing I got to say that I really admire is your tenacity, because no matter what health conditions get in your way, no matter what hurdles you come across, you find a way to persevere and keep going. And I think that's really wonderful. So I want to kind of take this in a different direction. I want to ask you, what are some of your big influences in comics? Because one thing I kind of caught from reading your prologue is I was like, a Watcher. I wonder if he's a Fantastic Four fan. So I'm curious to know, what are some of your favorite comics? What were some of your big influences in comics that kind of helped steer you in the direction that you're going right now?
Sure. Yeah. It's actually funny you mentioned Watcher. I wasn't a big Fantastic Four fan, really. The term Watcher in that sense actually comes from the Book of Enoch. It refers to the type of angels that were in that story. And sidebar, I'm a huge theology nerd, so that's where like a lot of this, I was like, I have all this, not useless information, but just a ton of I went to seminary, had a ton of theology information, and I'm like, I'm not a pastor, so what do I do with this? And that's how we got Memoirs of an Angel. But comic books, man, geez, who wasn't an influence, honestly? But I think the biggest ones, I think growing up, my teenage years, man, Frank Miller really captivated me. His Daredevil series, and then of course, Batman Year One and The Dark Knight Returns were huge. And then I think the biggest part, though, the thing that really showed me like, oh, this is what comic books can be, is Sin City. Because it wasn't superheroes, and that was really like the first thing that's the first time that ever happened to me in reading comics and engaging comic books. I was like, what is this? This is like your old gritty, film noir stuff, and it's gorgeous looking. And so that was really like, Frank Miller really showed me what comic books could become. And then Neil Gaiman with his Sandman series, as far as writing comics, just took it to the next level for me. I was introduced to Neil Gaiman as a comic book writer before I read any of his prose work. And Sandman just really has a huge influence on Memoirs of an Angel specifically. But man, he taught, just reading that series, Gaiman taught me so much just participating with that story. And then in my late teens and early 20s, I discovered Hellboy as a comic book. I had seen the movies, loved the movies, and then I finally bought the first trade and fell in love. Mike Mignola is my biggest influence.
Did you see that comment from Rick?
What?
So
yeah,
he was like, make sure you don't forget Hellboy. He didn't forget Rick.
I didn't
and
forget it, buddy.
And I think going back to what Rick was saying earlier, he said, you dropped the C word, crap, on the air. He's allowed to drop craps. How many craps are we allowed to drop on here, Jay? Can I give a crap? I don't give a crap.
We're kind of PG-13, so if you're allowed one F-bomb later in the day, I think crap will be okay.
Yeah, crap is okay. I don't give a crap, but I don't have to give a crap.
Yeah,
I will give a crap.
There you go. But
sorry.
Yeah, no, Rick's a good friend. He's actually, good grief. What is it, Rick? Midnight where you live? Yeah.
Where is he?
He's in Denmark.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Well, Rick, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah,
that is support right there for you.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Excellent artist as well. So go follow Rick's Facebook page. But I do think, aside from those guys, Bruce Timm's Batman the Animated Series, not comic books, but comic book adjacent, that had the biggest impact on me as an artist in general. I mean, I've told people before, if you really study my art style, it's pretty much Bruce Timm's Batman the Animated Series and Mike Mignola just kind of made a baby, and that's what you got. And so but those guys specifically are my biggest influences.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's interesting. I just finished this huge run of Detective Comics. I've been talking about it on my sales shows, and you can tell it was very much influenced and inspired by the Batman the Animated Series. And I think there was something so special about that, the way the stories were able to kind of be self-contained yet part of the larger continuum at the same time.
For sure. Yeah. And there's just it showed mature storytelling for children that I think we lack in a lot of stories, which really during the 90s you kind of got a lot of, which turns out Bruce Timm actually is a huge part of that. His dual level storytelling really shined during that era.
Yeah, the one thing I always think is important when writing is you never want to write down to your audience.
Right.
That's why, like, when some people are like, hey, I should do a kid's book, or I should do something that's targeted towards people who like, TNA books. It's like, if you're going to just target people that way, you're kind of writing down to those people, unless it's something that comes from within that you want to do, because now you're just trying to hit a demographic. And I've never been about that. But based on how you talk about your series, it seems like this is something that is of genuine and profound interest to you. So you had mentioned briefly that you were involved in religion. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And
Sure. Yeah. So I was raised in church, raised Southern Baptist, and I accepted the call to vocational ministry when I was in middle school, and I just got really nothing but support from that. So I just kind of figured that was my life. That was what I was going to do. And then when I graduated high school, went into college, I was in community college for a couple of years before I went to seminary. And that during that time, I had my first like deconstruction, reconstruction cycle, way before it was cool to do so. And I mean, I was like, for the first time in my life, someone who was much smarter than me, my professor, was calling what I believed a creation myth, and that it wasn't actually true. And I was like, what? and so I really I had a crisis of faith, and I sought out as much information as I possibly could. And that ultimately took me away from the denomination that I was raised in, And not because I rejected God or anything like that, but I was just like, man, like there's so many things about my faith that I just don't know why I believe what I believe. And I feel like so many people land there about their beliefs in general, not just within Christianity. So many people, they were raised in whatever religious tradition they were raised in, and then they go out into the world and they just never really kind of put those pieces together as to like why you actually claim to believe this thing. And so my mission in life kind of pivoted from vocational ministry into just, hey man, like I really care about like the thing that I have up to this point dedicated my faith-based life to, and I don't know jack about it. You know what I mean? Like not really. Like I know the shallow answers, I know, but like when you really like ask like the first like tricky problematic question, um, I had nothing to say. And so I couldn't stop finding just asking questions and finding answers, and that was pretty much that became my goal during seminary, because I started off going in for youth ministry, and did youth ministry for a couple years, and then realized this isn't for me. I'm not. I saw some things behind the scenes at the specific church that I was at that I just didn't. I was like this isn't my thing. I'm not made for professional. I'm not made to be a pastor
Yeah, it's
professionally.
sometimes it's hard watching how the sausage gets made. It's like,
Yeah.
and the same thing I think applies to comics too. Like there are a lot of
Oh,
people
for
who have
sure.
this grandiose ideas of what working in comics is like, and they get into it and they're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
maybe this
Yeah.
doesn't mean I don't love comics. Doesn't mean I'm not a part of it. Doesn't mean I don't believe in
Absolutely.
religion anymore. There're just certain things that you realize, hey, this is not
Yeah.
for me.
And it was more just like, like not one like again, not every professional circle is the same everywhere. Like it just depends on where you're at the time, what kind of culture what kind of subculture that professional place has, and that's across the board. Churches, comic book industry, whatever. But I just realized I was like, this isn't for me. But I still went to seminary for a little while, just to continue really gaining knowledge and figuring out from a personally like what do I believe, and from that my love for comics, my love for storytelling, my love for drawing and art just kind of married that passion for theology, and so I left seminary, um, and I really just knew I was like, okay, Memoirs of an Angel, the title, the base story was there from high school. Like I've been working on this idea for forever. And I now had like the world building structure that I found in theology in my theology studies. And I was like, I'm just gonna pretty much use this story as my diary on how I feel about my faith, the deconstruction that I've gone through, the things that I've seen that I can't stand, but also the beautiful parts about it. My the things that I still hold true to with my belief in God and the truths that I've found in Christianity that I haven't left. And I think that you really see all of that in the story. Now, I say all that, but this story isn't like a preachy Christian cheesy thing. No, like this is very much a story, because I think when you try to preach in a story, you lose the whole aspect of what storytelling is about. You're not, you see a lot of that in just bad writing in general. When you have a message, you have a theme that you're really trying to get across to somebody, the worst thing you can do is directly address that message and theme in the story. Like you tell it through your characters' interactions. You tell it through, almost to the point where it's just so subtle that you really you're not acknowledging it until the story's over. And then you realize what the story was about. And that's my goal here. I mean, I'm not perfect with it. Nobody is, but that's how religion plays into this is just all the things that matter so much to me, all the crap that I've been through, with the church and with friends that are no longer my friends because of falling out with their different beliefs and all these things. It's all poured into this story, and ultimately into this now multi-book universe that's well underway now. And so yeah, that's where it all fits.
I see. All right, we're going to continue this conversation after a very short commercial break. And when we come back, I want to talk more about what your plans on Kickstarter are and what our goals are and everything, because this is kind of a chance for us to not only get on that pre-launch page, which Jay, thank you for dropping that link again. While we're in commercial mode, please be sure to click on that link, hit that notification button, and then come back and listen to our important messages from our sponsors. We'll be back in just a moment.
Download our app on Google Play and the App Store. It's so simple, even my mommy can use it. Twitch, it's not just what happens when you have too many energy drinks anymore. Check out our content over there too. In a world where you hit like and subscribe on our YouTube channel, that'd be really great, thanks.
And we're back. Okay, so let's talk about your Kickstarter. I think something that's really important for us to kind of make sure some ground we cover is to understand why you're coming to Kickstarter and what your goals are for your campaigns. I think that gives us a better sense of how backing your campaign is going to help you bring this project to life and all that other stuff. So why don't you give us an idea of like why you're going to Kickstarter and what your goals are once you hit that launch button.
Yeah. So this is our seventh, this is our eighth, Kickstarter campaign. We've had 7 successful Kickstarter campaigns. The reason we do Kickstarter ultimately is because if we don't have funding at the beginning, we just can't afford to print the books. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And we do all the funds go back into creating the next book and getting us to different shows and having an inventory to take to those shows. And that's really what the Kickstarters help us produce the product, but then the ongoing stuff in between the Kickstarters. And that's the biggest reason why we do that and where those funds go. But and really the reason that we've done it with Kickstarter instead of any other crowdfunding platform is we did our first one, we chose Kickstarter, we did our first one, we had a huge success, and we just kept doing them, and they've been great every time, thankfully, to our amazing group of readers and backers. And I love Kickstarter. I'm a backer, or I guess it's called a super backer. I just spend too much money. That's what that means. But I've backed like 250 something Kickstarters, and I love rewards. I think they're really, really cool because they're so exclusive most of the time. A lot of times you don't get the little bells and whistles that come with the book if you buy it on Amazon, or you even buy it from the person's from the writer's web store. With Kickstarter, the whole thing with that is it's not just a pre, or it's not just a you're not just like pretty much saving your spot for the book whenever it comes out. It's a way to get more merch, to get more stuff. Really, the higher you back, the higher level you back, the more stuff you get. I mean, this campaign, we are doing a nice wooden bookmark for our first like tier. We're doing wooden bookmark, a really awesome poster, 11 by 17 poster by Nathan Thomas Milner, who has done work with Fangoria magazine, Playboy magazine. He's done a ton of Blu-ray covers for horror movies. He's a good friend of mine too, and he's doing the poster for this campaign. And then we've got beanies and T-shirts. We've got a coffee mug that's exclusive, hand thrown by our friend here in Louisville. And so like things like that, it makes the process more fun. And it really gives people a reason to get involved with creating the product, because really every book that we've done, we have included a thank you page that includes every name of a person who's backed the Kickstarter for that specific book, because we look at our backers as co-producers of this product. You're investing your money into making sure that this thing gets made so that we can continue to do it. Plus you get all this cool stuff that comes with it, depending on what tier you back. And that's why we do Kickstarter, because it provides us with the ability to not only give our backers a really cool, engaging experience, but we also get to do it. It takes away any kind of middleman. It's just us and our readers, and I love that. As a creator, I love talking one-on-one with my readers throughout the entire process. It's fun for me. And so, yeah, all those things kind of rolled into one is why we continue to do Kickstarter.
Now, this is a personal question for me, and then I want to open it up to anybody else who's watching the show right now. The whole point of us doing Talking Shop is to give you guys a chance to ask questions as well. But here's my personal question for you. I have always been working for print. I always, make comics for print, and I noticed you went the route of Webtoon. Can you tell us a little bit about Webtoon and like why you got into that and how it's been working for you and all that?
Sure. Yeah. It's I haven't what's on Webtoon right now has been there for years. I actually don't do Webtoon anymore. The series, I kind of saw Webtoon as an opportunity to put the story out there in front of people that didn't already know what Memoirs was. And so I put it out there, and I enjoyed it. It got some reactions, not a ton. And it was during like a process where we were trying to figure out, okay, like where's the main place we take Memoirs, right? Like, cause like I didn't want it to be just, I didn't want my attention to be divided in like 14 different places every day. And so we discovered that Kickstarter was it for us. That was like the big main focus. And so at the end of that brief stint that we did on Webtoon, it pointed everybody to the current Kickstarter campaign, and then ultimately my website, which is up to date pretty much all the time with the latest stuff we put out. But Webtoon, I mean, really, I just think digital comics in general are a very unique way of telling a story, mostly because of the presentation that you get. Really, with Webtoon, it's a constant scroll, and the format is for your phone or your iPad, but I think it's mostly preferable for your phone. But then, like,
what is it like? What would you do? Like a couple pages a week or something? Like, how does it work
for Webtoon?
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's at whatever pace you want. I mean, I know some creators who do it every day. They'll update every day, some update every month, some update every other week. Just depends on your schedule, depends on your ability to get it out there. When I was on Webtoon, when I had the series on there, I was updating, I think, once every couple weeks at first, and then I went once a month before we initially, stopped engaging with Webtoon for the series. But yeah, I mean, it's essentially like anybody who would do a webcomic on their website, their own personal domain. It just depends on what your bandwidth looks like as a creator and how quickly you can get stuff out there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I actually kind of admire the fact that you went the webtoon route, because it's such an interesting. I hear it's a very popular format. Well, I don't hear. I know it's a very popular format.
Yeah.
And but I've never, when obviously when you're working in print comics, you're thinking more of like a horizontal layout. You're not thinking of this vertical, scrolling down. So, have you printed your comics? Have you seen them have you done it in print? And
oh yeah, we started in print. We've been print the whole time.
So,
yeah.
So how did you transition? Did you just take panels and just start laying them on top of each other?
Yeah, pretty much. So what I did was because I made the first, good grief, I think I made the first like 4 or 5 issues before we started on Webtoon. And I mean, this is, the print, this is the trade paperback of the first 4 issues. So like I had like, say this page, whoop, there we go. So like this page, as you said, it's read horizontally. But with Webtoon, what I did was I just took the order that the comic book was horizontally and just, did this instead. And the fun part, I say fun loosely, but it really, you can almost break it down to panels, not just pages, which is actually preferable on Webtoon because you can't, you have a very limited space because you're communicating with phone screens mostly. It's kind of like how I viewed it was I broke it down to how like Comixology or now Kindle, when you read a digital comic, you can actually read it a panel at a time now instead of pages at a time. And I like that because I think it really provides you the element of surprise as a comic book reader. Was we all know comic books, you've really got to discipline yourself not to cheat and look at the next page, if there's like a big reveal on the right or something like that. And so this way, with Webtoon and with any digital comics, you can just kind of go panel by panel. But yeah, as a creator, I took the different panels and just, essentially just formatted it the way that a vertical scrolling would what would appeal to that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about doing as well. And so you started out with going to Kickstarter. So how many Kickstarter and you mentioned that you've been doing this since 2015. So what Kickstarter campaign is this going to be for you? How many have you done?
This is the 8th one. This will be our 8th campaign, and we've had 7 successful ones. I don't want to jinx myself. We've had every single campaign has been very successful, and we're really blessed and thankful for that. It really, and I really mean this. Our readership is just amazing. They show up every single time. And they're really enthusiastic about the work, and I appreciate that. I think that as a comic creator yourself, you really can't ask for anything more than that.
I agree. And when you go into the campaigns, how often do you see repeat backers? Are you always able to depend on the same backers to come back? And what kinds of things are you doing to get new backers?
Really, I mean, the biggest, focus that we've had is social media. That's been the biggest help. That's where we've built all of our fan base, is through social media, through going to shows. I have an email list. That's how we've acquired such a big group of fans, and really just staying consistent has helped us keep them. And then of course, just keep hitting, copy and paste on that process. Just meeting new people online, engaging with them, sharing my stuff with them, engaging with their stuff. A lot of my readers are also fellow creators. So, we have that shared interest. We enjoy each other's company online. And I think that's, being at this stage, because I look at myself as a blue collar creator. I think like most indie creators are like we're not in this for the money or the fame, because if we were, we'd be idiots. But I'm in this to tell a story with people that will appreciate it, and people that I actually want to engage with. It's not just about how many bodies I can fit in seats on a Kickstarter campaign. I really do enjoy interacting with folks, and I really do enjoy. I know this term is scoffed at a lot, but I enjoy building a community aspect within my readership, and really, for the most part, we've found success in actually doing that, in cultivating a group of friends instead of fans. It's really people that I know at least something about you, and we can interact on some level. That's what I love mostly about this, and I think that's honestly helped us keep the people that we have, because we care about the people who are picking up our books.
It's interesting. And going back to that for a moment, I've had a lot of conversations with other creators, and we always think that Kickstarter is sort of like exactly that concept of just we're kickstarting this, but then after that there is we want to sell outside of Kickstarter, because the backer, you're not going to get thousands upon thousands of backers on one campaign. You're probably going to hit like a couple hundred at most. So I always like to ask creators, what do you do outside of Kickstarter in order to get your work out there? What are the different methods that you use to distribute your work?
Big thing is Comic Cons, going to shows, going to book shows, book signings. I mean, we have some amazing comic shops in our area that have allowed us to go and set up on Free Comic Book Day, and just have different book signings. Regional shows are bread and butter. That's huge. It helps us meet people. It helps us get the book into hands of people that would never find it on Kickstarter. And that's why the Kickstarter matters so much, is because it provides us to get that inventory to then go out to the shows, and provide the books to people that we don't know online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what would you like to see? Like, what are some other avenues of distribution that you're looking into?
Right now we're actually looking. There's a new, I don't know how new it is, but it's new to me. A process called Draft Digital. It's a printing company that also helps you get your book in Barnes and Noble, libraries. Libraries is probably the biggest thing that I want to see my books in. I'm a huge advocate for libraries. I love going to the library. I think it's a great way to introduce not just kids but adults to books of all shapes and sizes, prose, comics, whatever. And I do want to see my stuff in more mainstream stores eventually, which Draft Digital, like I said, we're looking into that now. That seems to be the easiest way to get that, to make that happen, actually.
Interesting. Very cool. Okay, let's see. Do we have anybody in the audience that has any questions for Brian? And we'll give you guys a second to ask your questions. And while we're waiting on that, if you haven't yet, be sure to check out the link and hit the notification button for Brian's campaign, which is set to go live in how many days again?
In 8 days. It'll be going live on June 25th at 12 p.m.
Cool. Awesome. So, Brian, outside of comics and everything, what are some of your interests? Like, tell us a little bit about yourself while,
Yeah.
Well,
mostly these days.
We got about 8 minutes to kill.
Yeah, you're good. Mostly.
Let's just have a conversation.
Oh, I can chit chat for however long.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, no, honestly, these days, man, it's a struggle with my health. Every day looks different. And like I said earlier, some days I can barely make it out to the living room from my bedroom. I have a flexible routine that's very limited. So because of that, I read a lot and I watch a lot of TV. But here lately, I have not been watching anything modern. I've been really stuck in the 80s and a lot of things. I'm a huge horror buff. I love 80s horror. I think it's just some of the best and some of the stupidest things you could have ever watched came out of the 80s in the horror genre. And really it's a lot of fun because my favorite, like I'm not a huge body horror fan, but I think the best and most practical effects came out of Tom Savini and the 80s horror scene. And because of that, because of my, over the last couple of years specifically, my newfound interest in that genre, a lot of that stuff is found in Memoirs of an Angel. There's a lot in the new the prose book coming out next week on Kickstarter. It's very, there's some scenes that are gross, like just super gross. There was one time my wife was actually reading the manuscript. This is before any illustrations had happened. And she was reading the manuscript and I was over there reading something else. And I just kind of looked over at her and I just saw this face of utter disgust as she's reading the manuscript of the book, and I was like, this is what I want. I want to gross some people out sometimes. But yeah, honestly, that's it. On my days where I'm not writing and drawing, it's just kind of I'm watching documentaries, love true crime, and I'm watching horror and just some whatever really strikes my fancy. I've actually started for the first time the Wheel of Time books. I'm a little bit behind, but I
Books?
do what?
Who wrote those?
Let's see, Robert Jordan. He passed away. Brandon Sanderson actually finished the last couple of books of the series, and I'm a huge Brandon Sanderson fan. He's done a lot of
He's
his
huge
own,
on Kickstarter, right?
yeah. Oh yeah, he did that. And he's, man, what a great guy. When did that happen? A couple of years ago, he did his stuff on Kickstarter, and what he did, I don't know if you know this or not. He actually ended up finding Kickstarter campaigns that were just like they were in their last 48 hours and they were just this close from getting funded, and he went ahead and funded the rest of it no matter what the amount was. And then he went and helped a lot of creators that were struggling on Kickstarter as well. It just shows what a stand-up guy that dude is. Like I really appreciated that as a creator myself.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest fear, right? As creators, is like, not getting funded. It's like you put everything you can into your work, and then all of a sudden it's like it doesn't fund. And is that a sign that it's a failure, or that it's not?
No, not at all.
Not at all. But we can't control what's going on. Like one thing I know that is going on in the convention scene, which is primarily where I make my money, is sales are down overall for everyone right now.
Oh yeah.
It's not necessarily a financial thing. It's just that sales are down because people are buying less. And it's not a permanent thing, but right now it is a thing.
Yeah.
And how do we navigate through that? And what does that tell us about our stuff? Does that mean fewer people are interested in what we're doing? Does it mean that we need to change something? Does it mean that we just need to stick through it? Those are the kinds of things I think about personally, and I like to ask other creators. So let's go back to conventions for a minute.
Sure.
How many conventions do you do a year, and what are some of your favorites?
Well, right now we're in a bit of a transition period because I physically can't go to shows because of my health. So that's been a big hiccup. We were at a place before my health really went downhill. We were doing, oh gosh, I don't know how many shows. I think we were like doing 10 or 15 a year. And which isn't a ton, but there's a lot for us. We had, 2 full-time jobs. So that was a lot, but it's dwindled down very much. Just because, I mean, I can't go. My wife and our good friend Sarah, who's our assistant for the business, they go to a few shows still a year. My personal favorite is Lexington Comic Con. That is.
I've always wanted to do that show. I've always heard such.
Oh, it's great!
About it.
Such a great show. That's usually in our top 3 most successful shows every year, and yeah, that's a great show. We also really love. There's a library show in Jessamine County. The Jessamine County Public Library does a show called Comic Surge every October. And it's a ton of fun. It's a library show, so it's free to get in. So, and as a creator, you pay $50 for a deposit and then you get it back after the show. And so, everything is, other than gas money and whatever food you buy, it's all profit, which is great. Those shows are awesome. But the show in and of itself, it's put on by people who love comic books and pop culture. And so, yeah, those are probably my favorite too.
I see. All right, Brian, we are coming to the end of our show here. So can you tell us how we can stay in touch with you, aside from going to your website and going to, the Kickstarter launch page or even your Facebook? Like, what's the best way for us to stay in touch with you if we want to?
Yeah, honestly, the best way is to go to brianrodman.com and sign up for my monthly newsletter. I send out an email every month. I just send one email. It's not a spam trick or anything. If you go down to the homepage at brianrodman.com, that's the best way to find, to just keep up with me every month, what I'm up to, what I'm doing. I usually have a cool, topic that I'm thinking through that I'll discuss. And then other than Brian, at the top of the website, you can find the Kickstarter, all my social media stuff. Everything is at the top of the homepage. So really, brianrodman.com is a one-stop shop for everything that you would ever want when it comes to me. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, Brian, thank you again so much for coming in, and everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in for this wonderful interview. And I wish you the best of luck with your Kickstarter campaign. I have no doubt that this is going to be another successful one for you, number 8. And stay healthy. Keep working. You're not alone. We're all in this together.
All right, man. Thank you so much. It's been a great show. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a wonderful evening.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.